Okay, from now on, no cuts. Oh my gosh. Hello! Join us as we go on an adventure from third culture kids to third culture adults.
Buckle up for a series of misadventures, identity crises, and the answer to the question, but where are you really
from?
Dun dun dun!
Dun, 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 dun. Hi, I'm Jess. I am Taiwanese, American, and everything in between. I am a creative director by day and shower thoughts philosopher by night.
Hi, I'm Thea. I'm a mixed-up must from the east and west.
Correct.
Tech manager by day and biohacking enthusiast by night. And
this time we're going to talk about, does culture affect
dun dun dun!
Identity?
But before we begin, can we switch sides? Because I feel like this side's my better side. Thanks. Okay.
She's gonna ruin the whole set.
Okay, there we go.
Fine. Okay.
I think this is better now. So, do you think you have cultural identity issues? Do you think you identify as your culture? What is your culture, anyways?
I was born in Taiwan, but then I spent half of my lifetime in America.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like my adult coming up age time in America. So I do relate closer to that culture.
Wherever you spend your teenage years or your formative years is where you kind of identify the most with, or you kind of learn the culture of where you're living in the most.
Yeah. And which is like interesting because a lot of time when I say that I'm Taiwanese American, I feel like a fraud. Because I don't hold American passport. Like I have a Taiwanese passport. But also every time when I go back to Taiwan, I don't feel like I belong. So it's just that funny feelings that you just don't feel you belong anywhere. And then every time when you're trying to introduce yourself and then who you are, your identity, you feel like you're lying about something.
Yeah. Apparently they've done a whole bunch of studies on happiness and longevity, and it's all about kind of community, and community is about belonging. And so when you have this identity crisis because you're from different cultures, it really puts your whole, self into mismatch because you don't feel like you belong anywhere.
Yeah.
And therefore your happiness levels are just, askew. Do you think you have a moment that you can share with us where you found your cultural identity really shaped, or your cultural background really shaped the identity of who you are?
As third culture people, it's no longer linear. Like even I have moments that I feel like my culture background heavily influenced me or who I am. It's not because I have a moment of, oh yeah, this is why I'm Taiwanese, or oh yeah, this is why I'm American. It's more like a combination of both. It's like sometimes if I found a very odd incident, like when two cultures merged into one, that's oddly is when I feel like that speaks closer to who I am. Do you have any moments that you have like this huge grand realization, like an aha moment?
So many.
I found who I am.
Well, I don't know. I think my cultural background definitely is relevant to my identity as a person.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, I present myself as mixed. And so that comes across in a lot of things that I do. I'm pretty
You're
not
like the
one
perfect
way.
definition of a melting pot.
I suppose so, yeah. Mixed mutt, essentially.
Real mutt.
So my mom is Canadian by culture, which is why my accent is very Canadian. But she's Japanese and German. And then my dad is very traditionally Japanese, and he's Korean and Japanese. So we've got like very traditional Japanese by culture and very hippie Canadian by culture kind of mismatched. And so I grew up with that in Japan as a kid, where I was the only foreigner kid in class because I went to public school as well.
I want to say the household I grew up in is like traditional Taiwanese. My dad and my mom, they did have experience going abroad and study abroad, especially my dad. So he always had this admiration of being American. So I remember when Costco, which is an American like wholesale.
I love Costco.
I think everyone knows what Costco is, but Costco opened in Taiwan. My dad started to go there every single week, and then we'll buy frozen food, and then he'll put frozen food in our bento box,
Oh,
and
wow.
I'll feel myself so American, even though
Yeah.
at that time I was like really little.
But you still had a bento box.
Yeah, and I crave like Chinese food,
Yeah.
of course. But after I actually fully adapted into American culture,
Mm.
like the mindset completely shifted. And then it's almost like, I don't know, like once whatever I found that was like so foreign and so surreal at some point becomes like not just norm, but something that was like, oh, I don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah.
But that wasn't because, like similar to how you grew up, is like a merge of truly merge of different cultures because that's where your bloodline's from.
Mm.
But mostly it's like the external aspect of my
Mm.
dad. So I feel like the third culture aspect actually started from there, even though I was still in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Another, I think, common threads you and I share is we didn't just like was born in one city, moved to another one, and then that was it. Is even adulthood, we moved from city to city, country to country. Like we both moved to Japan less than 2 years ago. But before
Mm-mm-mm.
that, we were like in a Western world.
Yeah.
And then coming back to not just Asia, but Japan considered like one of the most conservative.
Yeah.
Like the beauty of it is to be conservative,
Right.
to maintain those tradition. Like to us, it's such an interesting journey and transition.
Yeah.
But like jumping between culture and culture, starting growing up, what are some like highlight crises you faced
Yeah, for
in terms of
sure.
identity?
I mean, even now, me coming back here is part of my identity journey as well, because I'm like, hey, I should go back to my home country where I belong, where I'm from,
Yeah,
And it's kind of like this guilt or this like, this is where I should feel the most comfortable.
yeah.
But
Wait,
I think the biggest
yes.
crisis was I went back to Japan after I was done college when I was 21. And I was like, okay, I'm going to move back to Japan because I belong with, in an Asian country and where I grew up.
Mm-mm-mm.
But when I went back, I think I had kind of like a reverse culture shock slap in the face because I was already so Canadian at that point. I think it's just different values and how we act, a little bit more dynamic or um, I don't know, more communicative about feelings or things that you don't say or do. I was already, because I spent my teenage years in Canada, already too like loud, even though by Canadian standards, I'm not that loud. But by
And
Japanese standards, I'm
to American
really out
standard,
there.
you're not loud.
Yeah, exactly. But for Japanese standards, it's like
Yeah,
out
very
there.
loud.
And also, I found a lot of troubles connecting with people there because
Mm.
there's this whole protection of the Japanese culture here where they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm pure Japanese kind of thing. And so I found that really difficult as well because a lot of friendships here come from your school and you kind of
Mm.
keep those friends for your whole life.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
So I was really shocked that I
Yeah,
didn't fit in
yeah,
because my whole time I thought that I was Japanese.
yeah,
And then at that point I realized, oh shit, I'm not Japanese. And I kind of left with, the tail between my legs, kind of being like, oh, I guess I'm not Japanese. Oh, well, what am I?
yeah.
So I go back to Canada and actually that what's motivated me to live in other countries to discover how different cultures are because I found that different cultures really do affect how you live and who you are
Right, right.
and your identity, which is super important because you know you always want to figure out what you identify as. There's like comfort in knowing
Yeah,
and not being this ambiguous zone.
yeah. I think, which is the interesting point. I just thought of this. So, we so focusing on the question where you really from, but it's really it trickles down to who you really are. Even though I'm
Mm.
speaking Chinese, I don't really feel like I'm syncing with people around me. Am I the one who's having a problem? And then after that, you know, because I'm also not Taiwanese American in a way that I'm the second generations, and then my parents are the immigrants that moved to America. I didn't have that transitions from, okay, I know my parents are from this culture, however, I'm here.
Mm-mm-mm.
So I had to like self-taught a lot of things and then before I decided to go to the States.
Mm.
One things I did was watch a lot of movies. Like
Mm-mm.
it works for me for with English, with Japanese,
Mm.
and it works with a lot of people with K-drama. Like we're all like Korean.
Saheo. I do Saheo.
Okay, cool. That's a strong word. But yeah. And one thing I did was I watched movies, right? So I will go from like watching the same movie from Chinese subtitle,
Mm.
English subtitle, and no subtitle. And then it was like on repeat beyond 100 times. And but what I didn't pay attention to is what kind of movies I was watching. So at that time, I rewatching things like Mean Girls and Legally Blonde.
Great movies.
Great
Highly recommend.
movies. Love you, Tina Fey. But what I didn't know is the moment I got to America, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna prepare my accent. I'm also going to do like code switch and then kind of transition seamlessly. So
Mm.
nobody will find out I actually grew up in Taiwan. Nobody will find out actually my English was not my first language up to that point. And then I got a comment from my fellow American classmate saying that, oh, are you from Southern California? Because you sound like a Valley girl. And then that's when I was like, I don't like that.
Because that's also like they identify you as Southern Californian or
Yeah.
something when
And then the interesting thing is what happened inside of me was I thought I will feel happy when people say I'm from the state at that point in my life. But there's some part of me was like sad that nobody kind of realized I'm much more than that, you know?
you're
Also
much more than your culture.
I am much more than my culture, thank you.
What parts of the States were you in again?
Oh, so when I first moved, I was in San Francisco Bay Area. So yeah, it's California, but the
Yeah.
vibe is very different from
Right.
LA and San Diego, and you know, it's I would say more laid back
Right.
than that. So if you think about Portland, Seattle, it's more closer to that versus blue sky sunshine California.
I learned that California is very long.
It's very long.
Yeah.
It's like I used to, so I love going to Disney, period. And
She's a Disney girl.
I'm a Disney girl. I'm a Disney adult. No shame. And then but driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles or Orange County is like 7-8 hours drive.
Wow. That's
Minus the
ridiculous.
traffic.
Yeah.
And you know, like LA is known for their traffic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite long as a state. It's a great state.
Yeah. And you spent some time in New York too, right? Which is
Yeah, so
quite
half and
different.
half. Yeah. And then I feel like now I am definitely more a New Yorker than San Franciscan.
And San Francisco?
Franciscan.
Is that
Is
how
that
you
a
say
word?
it?
I don't know. I made it up. Let's make it happen.
San Franciscan.
San Franciscan. But yeah, I think after moving to New York, I do like the, cut the crap spirit.
Very direct.
Very direct. It saved me so much energy.
Yeah.
I might be like in other people's eyes, which I care not that much.
Jess, you have to think about
other people.
Yeah.
But I'm probably angrier as a person than before.
From your New York experience.
Yeah, it's called
So New York,
respecting my boundaries.
they are really big on boundaries there.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
talk about the word boundaries every
Yeah.
single day.
I like how it's like ingrained into, work culture and things like that, which I feel like a lot of other cultures need to learn. European cultures do that very well, but they don't
Talk
frame it
about
around boundaries. Yeah. It's just
because
more
they
like
already
fact of
are
life.
doing it.
Yeah.
And then Americans are more like manifesting. We are manifesting boundaries
That's true.
and mental health. Yeah.
I wish that yeah, people here would kind of latch onto that a little bit.
Yeah.
Not to the extent that America has.
Yeah. So, Taya, tell me something like funny story about you because I know you have some of those stories.
If I have some stories?
Yeah, stories, funny stories. About.
Well, one time I shit the bed
Not that one.
Unrelated.
Not that one.
Okay, not that
But
one.
like
Cut
some
that.
funny stories about like people mistaking your identity based on your assumptions.
Um,
Because I love stories like
so
that.
many. I think because I code switch very well,
Mm.
um, and when I speak Japanese, it's in a very Kansai dialect as well, and that's also part of the identity thing too, on a aside. And I think every country has, very localized accents and things like that, and there's always a big battle between the biggest city and the second biggest city about which one's cooler. It's the same in Canada where, there's Vancouver and Toronto, but the accent isn't as different. Whereas like Tokyo and Osaka or Kansai, there's always like that dialect. And so when I speak Japanese, because I have a Kansai dialect, people just assume that I'm pretty Japanese because of that localized dialect.
Can you put it in context? What is a Kansai dialect?
That's a hard thing to describe because, and that's another thing that I have trouble with, is when I speak Japanese, it's quite Kansai-ben, and I don't really know what intonation is Kansai versus, Kanto or like Hyojingo or Keigo. So while I can frame my words around Keigo and be like, arigatou gozaimashita, like, oh wow, my voice goes up an octave whenever I speak Japanese.
Yeah, all of us.
Yeah, but
Not like a child.
yeah, I
Yeah.
turn into a different person.
Yeah.
But because my intonation is very Kansai, even the words I say, they're like, oh, you're from Kansai. So there's also that fact that they look at me and they're like, oh, you're a Japanese person. So especially at work as well, what I like to do is play the gaijin card, because especially in work culture, there's always, if you are Japanese and you must act a certain way.
Mm-mm-mm.
And it's very difficult to act.
Gaijin card is like Gaijin is like foreigner.
Yes.
Foreigner card.
You get special
Or outsider.
privileges. There's pros and cons of the gaijin card,
Outsider
definitely.
card.
Yes. On one hand, you're never gonna be part of that culture, the Japanese pure culture.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you get to kind of be like, oh, I don't have to do that because I'm a foreigner. And they kind of are like, oh yeah, it's okay, don't worry. You don't have to do all this stuff.
Find it interesting, like at least to me, um, like back in the state, everyone tries so hard to fit in, right? Even though it's a immigrant built. It's like you almost feels like you're trying to fight a place saying that no, my root is here, versus like in Japan, at least a lot of us, the expats, were like, we already, like, oh well, we're never gonna be seeing that we belong here, so let's just hold the gaijin card. Like the mentality differences, it's quite interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go.
No, that's it. I think most of my like identity mishaps or people perceive me differently is just on that, mostly workplace. Or, dating in, Germany or in Canada where they expect me to be a very mild and quiet Asian female. And I'm definitely not that. So it's kind of like
whenever you're sober, you're kind of quieter than me. No?
Whenever I'm sober.
No?
Yeah, I guess so. But I think by
because I remember when I first met you. Like I met so far all the Canadians I've met. I always feel like whenever I talk to you,
yeah,
I find myself obnoxious.
Oh, really? So would you say I'm a calming and settling and grounded
like before
presence?
I get to know you.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. No, you're still great.
I think that's also the code switching between like work versus like
a different way.
Yeah.
You're still great in a different way.
Yeah. Do you find what name do you go by at work?
Oh my God. So this is a funny question. I have another story to share. Of course I was born in Taiwan, so using Chinese name is just it.
Yeah.
And although starting from early on, both me and my sister, we already have English name as part of our identity. We still use our Chinese name, right?
Yeah.
And then, but this is something, what I'm about to share, a lot of international students, especially in the state, will resonate with, especially those who had Chinese name. So my first year of college, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep my Chinese name on all the documents because that's who I am. I don't like my English name, and also
Why don't you like your English name?
because it's such a
It's not your
grandma name.
identity. Oh,
It's such a grandma name.
yeah,
And then also, people keep saying that you should be proud of your birth name.
yeah.
That's, your culture.
That's also a weird thing for people to say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But so that's the mentality I have.
yeah.
And I realized that first year of school, none of my professors remember who I am. Like it really doesn't matter how well I did in class.
Mm-mm.
They don't remember who I am
Yeah.
because to them all Asians look the same. First,
Yeah,
second, it's so hard enough already for them to remember how to pronounce each other's names.
yeah.
And then also it's not built for being spelled in Roman characters,
Right, right.
right? So to them they're all like alien language.
Fun fact, apparently, so they've done a study where they've kind of concluded that people, so I'm going to just take a stereotypical example of white people not recognizing Asian people's faces.
Okay.
It's not racism because
I'm sorry.
don't take this out of context. But also like Asian people, they can't tell like white people names apart or things like that as well because it's what you grew up with. And I think
Yeah.
up until a certain age, your brain just registers whatever you're used to more so. And so when you become an adult and get exposed to other cultures and other types of people, you have troubles like identifying the minutia between the differences, and it's harder for you to learn. So apparently
Interesting.
it's kind of just like biology that they're not used to other types of names or people. And
We
they all
love
look
a
the
Thea
same.
fun fact. Thea has a lot of fun facts.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. That's interesting, but still not excusable.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so basically, yeah,
It's a struggle for sure.
because they had such a hard time remembering or differentiating like between different international students.
Mhm.
I don't want to say I gave up,
Mhm.
but I eventually just like starting the second year, I add back my English name.
Mm-mm.
And starting that point, they just like easily remembers me because it's Jessica
Yeah.
with a Chinese last name. That's interesting to them.
Mhm.
And I identify myself as that name
Yeah.
ever since.
Yeah, I guess it's a struggle for anywhere as well. I've heard that same comment in Germany. In
Yeah.
the workplace. It's kind of like you kind of don't stand out at all because you
Yeah.
just blend in with everyone else.
That and also I'm not sure if this happened to you because I feel like your name is a combination of like Western and Eastern.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like when I use Chinese name, they immediately assume I don't speak English.
Mm-mm-mm.
And then the moment I open my mouth, that's when you get comments like, why are your English so good?
Wow, so impressive.
Oh my God.
I know they mean well, but it is kind of condescending, isn't it?
Yeah. I always feel
Yeah.
I know you meant well. I know
Yeah.
you see it as a compliment when you say it, but don't say it.
Yeah.
And which I have another story to share. Like I think a thing about being a multicultural or like people in general is we love to mind other people's business. So like you always give life advice to other people, whether or not they're asking for any
Yeah.
advices.
Yeah.
And when I was in the state, especially early years, when I was still like unsure about myself, who I am, like, do I belong here? Do I not belong here? A lot of times, my colleagues at that time, coming from good intention, but they'll always correct my grammar.
Do you not like when people do that?
I think it depends on how you do it.
Right, right, right. What's the proper way to correct someone's grammar?
I feel like, to me at least, I never correct other people's grammar.
Okay, okay.
Because I feel like but that's just me.
Mm-mm.
Let me explain why. Because I feel like at the end of the day, any languages, their purpose is to communicate. If you can understand what each other are saying,
Yeah.
that's the point, right?
Yeah. I went to see this comedian the other day, and she was saying the exact same thing, where she's like, why do white guys have to sit there and tell me to give me an English lesson while I'm talking? Like, they know what I'm trying to say, and they're like, okay, repeat after me. And she's like, this is so condescending.
Yeah, because to
Yeah.
me, what happened to me was like, again, they're all deep, like such a nice people, the
Mm-mm.
group of the colleagues I used to work with. And then the way they'll correct me, I don't feel they have ill intention at all.
Mm-mm.
Let's put it that way. But
Mm.
how they do it is if I would say something and then they'll have no response and they'll be like, try again.
Really? Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And then I will get so self-conscious
Yeah.
because I'm like,
Try again what?
try again. Okay, I'll try again. And they'll keep saying that till I say it in the exact way that they
Accept.
accept.
Oof. Oof. That's harsh.
Yeah. But to me, like in that moment though, I didn't know the feeling I had
Yeah.
was called being othered or like bigotry or, you know,
Yeah.
feeling that I was being
Yeah.
singled out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at that time, there's not a lot of people talking about what it means to be like
Their culture,
their
like
culture or
microaggression.
microaggression
Yeah.
or what was microaggression, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Has
Ugh.
any of that kind of incident happened to you? Not like grammar, but people
Mm,
giving you cultural advice that seemingly
yes, of course, all the time. I think especially this one time pops into my head where I was coming back from Greece to Berlin because I was living there at the time, and I went on holidays with this German guy. So he looks very German, and I'm looking pretty Asian. Um, and I was the only Asian person on the plane. So coming back, I got stopped at every single security stop.
oof,
And of course, I don't know. I don't think I look dangerous or anything, but maybe, it's just one of those like microaggression things
yeah,
that you kind of notice if you're in it, but
yeah,
other people around you don't really notice.
yeah.
The final straw that broke the camel's back for me was we were all walking down after all the security checks, and I was already kind of like, oh man, I've never been singled out like that before. This guy who's just kind of like leaning against a wall, he clearly worked at the airport, but he wasn't part of the security checkup, and he wasn't checking anyone else. But he sees me coming, and he's like, come here, let me check are you going to Berlin? Like, let me check your passport. And I was kind of already like in a mood. So I was like, whatever, you know what? Let me just get this over with. I'm not going to cause any dramas. So I go to, show him my passport, my ticket, and everything. And then he sees a German guy clearly coming with me. And once he sees that there's a guy from like a white guy with me, he's like, oh, actually, it's okay. You can go.
Ah,
And then at that point, I was like, what the hell
yeah,
just happened? Because it was very clear that, you know, I don't know whether he saw me like subconsciously, like am I a possession of this like white guy? And that goes into a whole another rabbit hole of like racial whatnot. Um, but yeah, and then I tried to describe to the German guy that I was with how this is really not cool. Like I would have much rather preferred if he just followed through and checked my stuff rather than sees that I'm with you and says it's
yeah,
okay
yeah,
because oh you're you're white so you're gonna take care of this person kind of thing.
yeah.
And he was just like not getting it at all. And we got to talking about how, because at that time the Stop Asian Hate was going on as well.
Mm,
And I was like, man, I can't really stand these microaggressions. Like, that's like the first time I've gotten singled out like that. So obviously before. And he was there to see it all. But for him, it wasn't a big deal because he wasn't in it, I guess. He only just saw it and he was like, oh yeah, that's really unfortunate. But what I would do in that situation is just like, don't think about it. Just let it happen. Like don't worry about it. And I was just like, okay, sure, that's very stoic of you. It's very pragmatic. Yes, and it's true. You can't really change the things that other
I love
people
when
do.
they say, just take it
Just
lightheartedly.
chill, just chill.
Yeah, just sing a song.
Yeah. And then I was talking to him about the whole like, don't you know this whole Stop Asian Hate is happening? And he's like, oh, I had no idea. And I was like, don't you keep up with what's going on in the world? And he was kind of like, no, I'm not going to go out of my way to educate myself about all the I don't know, like the hurt and like the wrongdoings in the world because that's not part of my life. But
Mhm.
if I see something happening in front of me that is an injustice, then I will point it out. And of course, I'm not racist. I'm not, I don't think in a way that is discriminatory. But it just doesn't affect my bubble, kind of thing. And so that made me very disheartened and sad that like
Yeah.
that's kind of the mentality of a lot of people. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that's the most you can do as well, right? On one hand, you can do your best to kind of get to know other cultures, live in other cultures, see what it's like, and kind of build that empathy
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah, which is like so important. I feel like,
Mhm.
of course, we encounter those kind of incidents all the time. It's
Yeah,
annoying, but it's also like such educational moments for us
yeah,
because then you realize you're also in your bubble, right? Because you kind of, at least to me, like in my cases, I used to assume that people are as proactive in educating themselves as, not that I'm such an expert in that, but at least stay curious
yeah,
about what's happening outside your bubble. But then even thinking, having that thoughts is a bubble
yeah, yeah,
of a form. And I would say like, um, I really get annoyed when people in more, not just privileged position, but not in a position where they can resonate with you or your experience to give you advice that's like, don't think too much about it. Like, what's the big deal? Like the what's the big deal is where that you kind of have to acknowledge where you need to work on, because
mm-mm-mm.
like that reminds me of one time I was at this gathering. I know almost no one in that group, but an acquaintance of mine took me to that house party, and then besides me and her, like the rest are they're white, and they've been living in Japan for a long time. So it's like the mentality is also different when you talk about like culture or minorities or like any kinds of social issues. Like the how you approach is different. So that's
Mm.
also like some things I need to keep reminding myself. It's like I'm not in a social war zone anymore. Like I was in New York. I need to
Mm.
adjust myself in that way.
Yeah,
But when we're talking about something, they started to questions or brought up the thing of they don't understand why the question, where are you really from, is so harmful.
it's so
They're,
triggering.
yeah, but
Yeah,
in their eyes they're like, we just want to know, like we are just curious, what's the big deal of that? And
because
then,
your identity doesn't match what you're saying or like what we perceive as your
yeah,
identity.
but to
Yeah.
them it's like, because what they don't understand and probably never will is it's like a marathon and the paper cut on our body and on our mental health is every single time you ask that questions, especially to people like us, like third culture kids, immigrants, like any minorities, any people who are not falling into like a social norm and mainstream
Mm.
spectrum. That's the questions that kind of like a harsh reminder, like we don't belong anywhere.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah.
you're asking these questions, or else you don't even ask, you just see. And
Constantly being othered.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then I feel like so what you mentioned is like, to that guy maybe he meant no harm, he probably just feel
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
that's the advice or comments that would probably help you feel less stressed
Yeah.
out, in the end backfire.
But why is it that like I was in a situation in me and three other friends were traveling, three Asians, one white girl, and we're all kind of like third culture, different culture kids. We're all
Mm,
adults. At the time, we all lived in Berlin and we were visiting Greece. And we sat down in a restaurant, and the waiter was like, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And then we're kind of, all the three Asians were just kind of like, ah. And then we're just like, Berlin. And then he was like, "Oh, but really, like, where are you guys really from? Are you really from Berlin?" And then he wasn't really like, I don't know. He was kind of prying at the fact that we didn't look like we're from Berlin.
yeah,
The white girl was like, "Oh yeah, actually I'm from America, but I lived in London, blah blah." And she was like happy to have that question, whereas like the Asians,
yeah,
were kind of just like, ah, like
yeah,
this again. And then
yeah,
afterwards we were discussing how, why is it such a polarizing question? Um, but why is it so polarizing for, in that particular group, Asians, and not so for whites, or
Mm,
maybe for like black people, brown people, whatever, you
yeah.
know?
I think at least in my experience, also because we got so many questions like that, well,
Mm-hmm.
I started to have some fun in it. You know, like you when I was in back in the state, whenever I take Uber or cab, and then the drivers will be like, "Oh, where are you from?" And then I'll be like, "I'm from here." They're like, "Where are you really from?" And I start making stories every time they ask me questions. I'll be like, "Oh, my mom is actually this princess in China, and my dad met her on a business trip, and he's actually Korean." And I start making up this story because
Mm.
they'll never know
The
anyway.
creative writing exercise.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So kind of like if life hits you a lemon,
Mm-mm.
make a huge pot of lemonade.
I love lemonade. CC Lemon represent.
Yay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting to just see how cultures collide and how people react to it as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
But not just that, right? From big to small. Let's
Yeah.
talk about food.
Speaking of different, yeah, cultures. Are there any foods that you tie into your identity from your different cultural backgrounds? Because I think food is such a big part of each culture. You know, they've got like specialty, in Japan, natto, in Germany, we've got sausages, Canada, maple syrup.
Maple syrup. Yeah, I think to me like this is where playing a third culture adult is such a nice thing because you
Mm,
can pick and choose when to side with what culture.
mm,
Did you know not a lot of people know that boba tea is from Taiwan?
I knew that,
Fine. So not a lot
but
of
not a lot of
people.
people. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And then
Fun fact:
fun
bubble
fact,
tea is from
not that
Taiwan.
fun fact, but like when I was in New York, I found out not a lot of people know like it's actually from Taiwan. So
Mm,
I will always proudly say it's from my culture,
yeah,
you know?
right. Whenever someone mentions something from your culture, you're suddenly your identity does become, oh, I'm Taiwanese, or like
Yeah.
whenever someone's like, oh, Ryan Reynolds, I'm like, oh, I'm from Canada too, haha.
Yeah. And to me, it's food. I don't know. It's a great element or indicator to showcase the beauty of merging culture
Mm, mm, mm.
because
Yeah.
that's why there are so many like different cuisines and different fusions and stuff. Like food is what connects all cultures, I would say.
If you were to describe yourself as a food, which
Oof.
one would it be?
I will be those like yin yang hot pot. So we have a spicy one and we
Ah,
have a non-spicy
oh, okay,
one.
okay. Yeah, yeah. You can add as many vegetables or
Just like
meat.
be wise which one you want to
It
dip
can
your
start boiling.
dip your veggie in.
I love hot pot.
Yeah.
It's so delicious. I feel like every culture has a different type of hot pot as well. Like in Japan, it's shabu shabu. In Taiwan, it's
In Western is fondue.
yeah,
Over.
yeah, that's true.
Does that count as hot pot? I don't know. But yeah. And speaking of
Are there different things that you eat to maintain your cultural identity?
all the snacks.
Yes, yes. Whenever I have friends that travel back to Canada or Germany, I always ask them to bring some stuff back.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've asked my friend to bring back is I don't know if y'all are familiar with this. It's Hawkins cheesies.
Is that Cheeto?
They are like Cheetos on crack, made with real Canadian cheddar. We learned today that it's called stinky feet in some other cultures
Yeah,
because when
it's a
you
sticky
open it,
feet.
and this is actually from Belleville, Ontario, and that's like the really small town that I went to high school in. Um, so it's crazy that it's like famous in Canada because it's such a small town. So Belleville is known for like three things: Hawkins cheesies, Reed's Dairy, which has really great ice cream, and then also the highest teen pregnancy rate in Canada.
Nice.
Yes. Anyways, would you like to smell the real Canadian cheddar cheese?
It smells like a Cheeto.
Yeah. But you should like the consistency is very crunchy. It is way better than a Cheeto. Y'all have to try Hawkins Cheesies. Sponsor us.
We don't get sponsored, but sure. Okay. Do you want to
You didn't even
know?
try one.
The snack I brought. Okay, I'll try.
Your face. Also, there's that moment of sharing a food that you love with someone and then having the other person be so disappointed. It's so sad. No preservatives. Okay. All right. So
okay.
clearly, it's really good. Don't look
It's
there.
so good. It's so good. No, okay, let me try. Let me share mine. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So I also got this. It's called Prince Noodle. Prince Noodle. And then it's a very nostalgic snack.
What kind of memories are tied to Prince Noodle?
Like when you're little and in Taiwan, you know, a lot of kids, we really grew up very humble. So we'll have those like kind of bodega and just like very old fashioned grocery store. They all have like this kind of, so you have two types. You have like Prince noodles, you have science noodle. So
Science noodle?
yeah, but it basically
Does it make you smarter?
It doesn't. It actually make you dumber. So a lot of parents, they don't allow their kids to eat it.
Oh no,
But
no
basically-
science.
Yeah, basically it's a instant noodle, but instant noodle, they have a packet of like season in it, and then the instant noodle,
Okay, yeah.
and then you just pull this really small packet of season.
Can you eat it as noodles as well with water and stuff?
Of course. So like people would put it in hot pot sometimes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Or
Kind of like the Korean army stew.
Yeah. And then you crunch it.
Pretend like it's gonna blow up or something.
No, because it's like, and that's how you eat it. Oh, sorry, you have to shake it because the so much preservative, so it's like very different from the cheesies, even though it looks
This one looks
preserved as fuck.
It's not. It's so orange, but it's natural orange.
Okay, give me your hand.
Thank you. Wow, that's a lot. Am I supposed to just like
Chug it.
chug it?
Yeah.
I think it's gonna fall everywhere.
Be messy. That brings to the end of our episode. So we wanted to start a ritual
Delicious.
for our podcast, which, because the end of the day, we want to bring like good vibes into people's life.
Some thoughts for contemplation.
And then it should be inspirational in any ways possible. So we have this box. Okay. The first one is on Thea. She made like so many different thoughts in different papers. And we're just gonna pick one and share with you. It might be like completely irrelevant and annoying, but it'll
Let's find out.
Bring a smile onto your face. And that's
We
what we
hope
care
that
about.
You are having a great time by the end of this episode. And if not, this will. Hopefully.
This will. Okay, are you ready?
All right, let's go. Fun fact of the day.
Do you want to read it? Taya is a master of dad jokes.
Oh, how do you weigh a millennial?
How?
By Instagrams. But
that is the end of our episode. So, like, does culture affect identity?
Yeah, let us know. What's your identity? Is it greatly tied to your culture? Have you had any identity crises? Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And hopefully you guys can feel comfort in that there are people who also share very similar experiences.
Just so you know, we're still trying to find it. So you're not alone.
Identity.
Are you still going? What is going on?